On the Awaken Man podcast today, we've got our guest, Matt O'Connor from Fathers for Justice. Welcome, Matt.
Good morning. How are we?
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. And guys, for listening in, this podcast is a very specific podcast that we did to serve our members in our community. So we have guys in Awaken Man, a number of them. And actually, Matt, didn't realize how many guys struggled with this until, a couple of guys said, hey, I've got a financial goal because I'm going to be fighting for custody of my kids. And as soon as guys started talking about this, it was like, oh yeah, me too. And like this whole group of guys were like, oh my gosh, this is, and we realized that there was a couple of things going on. Guys were coming in, they weren't aware of how they could get support around this whole, it was not just emotional struggle they were having, but financial, legal, and it was a big, and it was really, really profound that so many guys are fighting battles to get custody of their kids, and there isn't enough information out there or support for men. And your name came up, and Fathers for Justice came up. So, just wanted to jam today on this podcast about your journey, your experience, and just to give some guys some information about how they can navigate this experience and do the best they can. So,
Yeah,
welcome.
well, that's a lot to unpack there, Benjamin. I mean, the essence of, if I just start with my story, I went through the family courts in 2001 and could not believe, I just couldn't get my head around it, as I think most dads that we speak to every day who are in court with us can't get their heads wrap around the issues and this alternate reality, which is what the family justice system is. You have no right in law to see your children in this country. Does not exist. And that alone is a big one to
can I
try
just
and
clarify that?
understand.
Is it as a man you have no right to see your kids, or is it male and
Both parents have technically no legal rights, but the underlying discrimination in the court system is that children live with the mothers and that fathers have access. So the system fundamentally discriminates on the basis of gender. If you've got a meat and two veg, the system will generally say you are a potential risk to your children. You have to be risk assessed. Mum can be out with the next Roy Whiting, next Ian Huntley, next Peter Sutcliffe, and nobody gives a fucking shit. But if you're the father, where statistically the children are safer with you than with her, you will have to leap through burning hoops with regard to safeguarding. A lot of people argue with me about this point and say, well, we must have a right. Of course we've got a right. You're talking shit, Matt, which is fairly insulting when people say that, because I've been doing this 22 years. I mean, nobody knows more about the family justice system than I do. And that isn't bragging. That's just from the painful experience of my lived experience and lived experiences of the 1.3 million people who've contacted us in the last 22 years. And we deal with everybody from rock stars to celebrity chefs to DPD drivers, etc. But the bottom line is, in legalese, the government says they do not believe that a legal presumption to contact would be helpful, because it would conflict with the child's best interest principle, which was introduced in the 1989 Children Act. This was then confirmed in David Norgrove's Family Justice Review in 2010, which Cameron, when he came into power, said he was going to scrap, but they let it run. The previous Labour administration had created this review, and David Norgrove said fathers have no rights and should have no rights. That is the bottom line. So you've only got a right to make an application to court. Your parental rights and responsibilities, which are pitiful, truly pitiful, do not give you any parental rights at all whatsoever. They simply give you rights to medical information and educational information about your child. That is the bottom line. So that's the starting point here. In terms of, and men need to get wise to that, because, I always say to people, solicitors tell you what you want to hear. We tell you what you need to hear. You might not like the advice, you might not like the medicine, but you best drink it, and drink it quickly. Otherwise, you will end up getting screwed. I could tell you, Ben, I have people come here who spent 30, 40K in a matter of weeks, 250K. I can't say as a celebrity who spent 800K recently. And the biggest spend we had was 3.4 million.
It's
Right.
fucking
And
mental. And
you,
what you've just said there about guys needing to be aware of this. So I'm going through a divorce now,
right.
right? And this has been going on for about 6 months. And fortunately, like Denise and I, we're on the same team, or we're not on the same team anymore, but we are cooperating with each other. Everything is very good. We're in a great place. I'm fucking fortunate. However, I had a lot of guys say to me, Pete, you need to be like, because I've got a 2.5-year-old Leo. He's my world. Like, he's everything to me. Like, if I would die if I didn't have him by my side.
Yeah.
And like, I was so unaware, like really, really unaware of everything that you've just spoken about. I would have had no fucking idea
Yeah.
that my rights didn't stack up, and that it would have been incredibly difficult for me to see my boy. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is just that guys like not having that awareness and just thinking things, oh, I'll be all right. Like,
The danger is, Peter, and we don't deal with divorce at this moment in time, but we will be doing a thing called Divorce for Men, and we sort of gently sort of address this during the Johnny Depp libel trial a few years ago with Amber Heard. We did some advertising around that, and we did something last year about what we call the deadly divorce trap, because the outcomes for men, your suicide rate triples post divorce. But also, what you want to do is to, generally speaking, if you can do this, is the best thing is before you leave the property, don't leave the house. If you leave the house, it's unlikely you'll get back in, and you'll also then become the non-resident parent straight away. So all your rights will go up in smoke, gone. As soon as you've gone out of the house,
Oh.
that's it. Um,
right.
and then a lot of solicitors will railroad you and say, let's get the divorce done. There's new no fault divorce laws. Let's get that done. But it doesn't resolve the issues. It simply displaces the issues into the family courts, where you're going to need a child arrangements order to protect your arrangements and your children. And then you've obviously got the financial settlement. Our advice to everybody, generally speaking, it is better to get a child arrangements order first before you get divorced, to protect your arrangements with your children. That will then have a material impact on the finances, because most mothers, I'm afraid to say, greed comes into this, the whole thing of women don't marry you for your money, they divorce you for it. And that is unfortunately the very sad and tragic reality of it. So, but if you have a child arrangement order that says, for example, live with both parents on a 50-50 basis, which is always our preferred version of events, that's what we'd like, that's what we campaign for, that is going to have a material impact on a financial settlement, because most mothers and most mother solicitors will say the children live with you because you're the mother superior syndrome, the children live with you, and the dad will get access time. And therefore, your need, and divorce is based on need, is going to be greater than the father's. My view is children, mothers and fathers are equal. Parenting time should be shared. And likewise, we need definitely a different system of divorce, because at the moment it is very, very sexist. We still have spousal maintenance. What the fuck, right? We are living in the 21st fucking century, right? And we're told women want to stand on their own feet, want to stand on their Milana Blahniks, right? Right? Yeah, all over me, right? But why do you need spousal maintenance, right? Right? People talk about support, spousal support. My advice to anybody is buy a bike for the mother, because a lot of them are staying at home. Buy a bike, or even if you want to invest a bit more, get an electric bike, get to work even quicker. Because it's a nonsense. It's a nonsense that we have spousal maintenance in this country, and that's why up to 1 in 6 divorcees, women come to this country to get divorced, because we've got these Jurassic judges, these Stone Age courts, these prehistoric thinking that belongs to the sort of the 1800s, not to the 21st century. But that's my polemic on divorce. The general view is, it's a dangerous thing. Getting married is probably one of the most dangerous things as a man you'll do. It's probably one of the worst contracts you'll ever sign. I say to people, if you want to sign a contract, get a Netflix contract because at least you can get out of it. Even when you're married, even when you're dead, they can still make a claim on your estate if you don't have a proper no fault break in the divorce, and a lot don't, unfortunately. So you've got to be. This is a public health warning. Yeah,
Yeah.
people like me have been trying to sound the alarm for the last 22 years and saying you need to be aware of the risks. That's my
Yeah.
message.
I think it. Well, I got divorced probably about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Pete's navigating divorce at the moment, and a lot of the guys who we come into contact with, they're going through that experience. Like they're like, oh, I never knew it would be this clouded, difficult, emotionally, financially, and they're still trying to run a business. They're still trying to
Oh,
grow their business or their
nightmare.
career, and it's and
Yeah.
it's and that's why I realized it was such a big issue for our the man that we serve. And what would be your advice? So Matt, a guy is listening to this podcast. He's either thinking of getting divorced or he's on the. Let's start with the near side of divorce. What are his considerations other than obviously staying in the home that he's mentioned before? What would be like I need to do these things before even considering this process if I've got children?
Right. First thing to do, if you're in the house, stay in the house. Avoid all arguments, avoid all disputes. You want to draft up what's called living together arrangements, which is what we advise doing. And then if mother's got a solicitor, or you can just send it to the mother and say, these are the house rules. So you might have zones in the house, times to use certain rooms, etc. You give undertakings, which is like a promise to each other, not to make allegations against the other parent, not to interfere with each other's parenting. And that's sort of like a safeguard document that we generally advise trying to do, just to give you some protection. Because what generally happens, and I'm really sorry to tell you the bad news, I've got bad news and I've got truly terrible news for you this morning. But let me just start with the bad news. The bad news is that what will happen? Mother will make an allegation. She'll, to get rid of the father, because you go to Women's Aid, right? Go to Women's Aid. There's a whole playbook. Go to Mumsnet. There's a playbook, right? If you watch Kerry Katona, Katie Price, people have made allegations against these fathers, remove fathers from their children, and they set this dangerous legacy to other women to encourage women that dads can be removed really easily. But what the mothers like to do in the house, they'll say, fathers push me. There's been an argument. Father's pushed me. She calls the police. The father's then removed from the property and then possibly bailed not to return to the property. It means he can't go back pending investigation. Or there's arguments in the house. If either party's filming, if the father starts filming, he's got to be careful because that falls under coercive control now. So you've got to be so careful what you do. And mum then may go to her solicitor and say, I want a non-molestation order and an occupation order to remove the father from the property. So if there is any sign of trouble, my advice is to get an application into the family court ASAP, do a C100 form seeking a live with both parents order so the children live with both parents based on the existing arrangements, but dealing with the future, which is going to be you're not going to be living together. And
Yeah,
that is the
I
most
think
important thing, is to get that first mover advantage.
Just to kind of really acknowledge that actually, we had a lot of guys. Like I've spoken with 2-3 guys who said we do a lot of conversations about emotional regulation. Like we talk about guys' anger, and
Mm,
one of the guys mentioned in a group, he was like, "Well, I've got this person in my life. She's antagonizing me. She knows what she's doing. She's looking for me to lose my temper. I'm
mm,
so angry." But I know I can't show it. And that is so detrimental to guys. And just like listening to what you're sharing there is like, that's a very, very toxic environment for a man to be in.
mm.
And that's like a lot of what the work we've done with anger. So guys can express their anger in a safer place is being so profound for a lot of these men going through that.
So
So
do you know
yeah.
what? It's a really good point. Is about channeling your anger in
Mm.
a positive way. I mean, when I went through it, I was like a bull in a china shop on steroids. I mean, I was like an XL fucking bully, right? I would have chewed shit off anybody, solicitors, judges. I mean, I'm of Irish descent, right? So we're sort of, we could start a fight in an empty room. We wouldn't be happy doing so. That's the sort of temperament we sort of generally generally, which is why I started Fathers of Justice. I'm a fucking troublemaker and provocateur. But the thing is, when I was going through it 22 years ago, whenever it was, I kind of realised I had to channel it, and I was suicidal, and I was incredibly distressed, and I was incredibly angry, and on one day I did lose it a little bit with my ex-wife's barrister. I like to say that I tripped on a little bit of loose carpet in the court, but he slid off the table. Unfortunately, I wished him well and forged a relationship with an oncoming bus. But that was after I'd been told in court because I couldn't get back into the house. I had to do like a generation game from memory, remember what of my property was in the house. And I was, to put it mildly, upset. But I realised after that, I thought the best thing to do is to park my anger over here, and then that would become Fathers of Justice, and concentrate on the children over here. And I know
Yeah.
it is a big issue because a lot of dads naturally get confused. They are angry against the mother, and then that clouds their judgment with what we're trying to achieve. We're not trying. This isn't like, a lot of people think it's like a Hollywood legal drama. Like Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth. And it just doesn't work like that. The court system is extremely pro-mother. And what you've got to do is, when you're dealing with the courts, you've got to show you're focused on the children. You're trying to reduce the temperature. We want you to be the reasonable, responsible parent. If you're angry about the mother, right, channel it another way, right? Our guys were climbing back in the noughties, probably you may still have been in nappies, where we were scaling Buckingham Palace, paddleboarding prime ministers, and
I
doing all this
saw it.
crazy.
I remember
Because
seeing that. Yeah, yeah.
that was our way of channeling the anger. That was our way of, and trying to channel it in a humorous and constructive way, because it
Dressed as
is.
Batman and Superman, and that
Yeah,
sort of
well, I
stuff.
look more like the Michelin Man and Superman, Ben. I can tell you, years have not been kind, sir. I'm afraid. But yeah, I mean, that was my way of doing stuff that was practical. I think men respond well if you can say, right, these are things you can do which are practical. But there is a
Yeah.
lot of advice we give people, and I'm not joking when I say I've had people tear shit out of me for the advice we give them, even though the advice is based on 22 years. We've got the best team in the country who tell it as it is. We give you home truths. We don't dress it up. We don't sugarcoat it. I know that can be difficult for people, but we have to be honest with people. And there's no point me telling you, it's all going to be fucking, rainbows over Gravesend if you live in Gravesend, and unicorns running down the M2. That ain't how it works. But we can, if you follow the advice and if you follow our protocols, we get great results. Got 85% success rate of reuniting children and fathers since 2001, and that speaks for itself. But hey, not everybody wants to go down that path. Some people think they can do it better. Good luck. If you want to use a solicitor, you're going to burn £10,000 to £30,000 before you pretty much even get out of bed.
Yeah, that's a question I actually wanted to ask you, because like earlier on you said, mate, he's dropped 800 grand in the last month, another one 3.5 million, another one 30 grand. Like why? Like, how does that work? Like, where does all the money go?
Well, solicitor, well, you're getting me onto a very sore subject. I have a bit like police officers. If I see a police officer, I'm allergic to them because I break out in handcuffs. I have a similar view with solicitors. I get, I want to. They're, in my experience, and I can only speak as I find, the vast majority are bottom feeders, particularly in family law. They can only make money by layer cakes, as I call them. So by having cases that drag on, and the only way they can get a case to drag on is they present a very, very rose tinted view of how the family courts operate. They mislead fathers left, right, and centre and saying we can achieve this and we achieve that. They don't explain to fathers what the risks are and what happens in court and the length of court cases. Because if you did, if a solicitor told the truth, you would never, ever give them a single penny. So, that's the issue with, and a third of our casework is digging people out of incredibly expensive holes, gold plated, which had been dug by very expensive solicitors. So my view is, particularly on children's proceedings, you can do it yourself and get support from us or get support from somebody else. But we try and give people the tools to do it themselves. You can do it economically, intelligently, and successfully. So that's our kind of raison d'etre for being. I said, the vast majority of the time, great, works incredibly successfully. Some of the time, people go off piste and want to do their own thing, which is fine as well. But we strongly advise people against using solicitors going through the family justice system because, in my experience, the solicitor supports the father in a way the rope supports the hanging man.
Just good analogy there. I think
What
that's
are
where
strong
the
views on solicitors?
yeah, just slightly, but that was actually what one of the guys recommended on. Actually, that he's like, have you spoke to you guys, because he said, oh yeah, one of the guys posted about how much he'd spent in legal fees, and another guy said, hey, listen, by the way, before you go and do that, you need to go and speak to Fathers for Justice, because and it was that was a sad state of affairs, that he just felt that was the path really, and he wasn't educated, and that's why we wanted to do the pod. Just kind of coming back to, so guys on the front end, so keeping your nose clean if you wish, like being as good as possible, clean as possible. Actually, what you said there, having a boundaries contract, about, I never even heard of that. I think if you're listening to this and that's something you consider, go back and listen to it again, because I imagine that'll be really powerful. What about a guy? He's decided to get divorced. He's going through it. What's next? What does he need to do to make sure it goes as well as it possibly can for him?
Well, I say the first thing is always making sure you've got a child arrangement or delivery by parents, or because that will have a material impact on the finances. And like a lot of people, I mean, before you go to court, it's mandatory to go to mediation. So mediation, unfortunately, is a tick box exercise. It is not a serious attempt at mediation under the current system. It was introduced a few years ago to slow down the number of applications being made by fathers. 97% of applications to the court are by dads who can't see their kids. So they introduced mediation, but it's only mandatory on the applicant, which is the father. It's not mandatory on the respondent, which is the mother. So the mother doesn't need to attend. And the mother can, I'll come on to domestic abuse in a minute. The mother can make all sorts of other reasons for not doing it. So mediation is a bit like when we used to be up on gantries and it was cold. It's a bit like pissing down your leg. It starts off feeling warm and nice, and then by the time it hits your ankles, it's cold and fucking unpleasant. So that's what mediation's like. It serves no purpose. You will go along. You have to do a session. The mediator knows it's complete bullshit exercise. The mediator will say, "Oh, they'll contact the mother. Mother doesn't want to take part, and they'll give you what's called a MIAM form, which allows you to make an application to court to say you've attended mediation." But some people think, oh well, they buy into mediation, which is great. There was a guy last year. It was a Virgin Airlines pilot, I think, and he spent like 10K on mediation. Had no contact during that time with his child, and finished the process. And he had this beautiful agreement. It was all like wax stamps and gold foil. I exaggerate slightly, but and he's got, I've got this mediated agreement, and mother's agreed this. And I said, your toilet paper has more value because at least you can use it. You can't use this document because it's legally privileged, right? You cannot use it in court. So whatever. So a lot of people get duped into spending chunks of money on this mediation process, which is completely worthless. I say the only thing that matters is a court order that will protect your relationship with your children. There is nothing else out there. There's no silver bullet. There's nothing else you can use. So in mediation, again, be extremely, extremely careful. The only positive I would say is occasionally, in a tiny percentage of cases, if the mother, who hasn't been egged on by the solicitors with regard to finances and money, if the mother is genuinely reasonable, you would take that mediation agreement and say, okay, well, let's draft up to what's called a consent order. And then you present a consent order to the court and get it rubber stamped. So you've got it as a court order. But unless it's in a court order, you haven't got nothing. And then the other issue we get, obviously, at the moment, in the age of Me Too, or as I call it, Me Too, is you've got this kind of reversal of the Salem witch hunt. I was in Salem a few years ago. It was bloody freezing. But I was there, and obviously the witch hunts were famous for obviously, which has been dunked or burnt at the stake or whatever. But the issue now with in the age of Me Too is that it is literally, I don't want to sound too disparaging, but the witches doing the hunting this time around. Any woman can point a finger at any man and say, "Oh, he raped me," and they do under the cloak of anonymity. "Oh, he's done this," or "There's been domestic abuse," without a shred of evidence. So, and women game the system because to get free legal aid, you've got to make domestic abuse allegations. So that encourages the gaming of the system. And so a significant proportion of cases, we're dealing with allegations. And Dad's guy in Ireland the other day, who refused to believe that the mother didn't need any evidence. And I said, she does not need any evidence, because what it will come down to is what's called a fact-finding hearing, and a court will make a judgment based on the balance of probabilities. So whose testimony does the judge prefers? The woman who's behind a screen in court, rocking backwards and forwards crying, or the big ugly hairy old bloke on the other side of the court? And 9 times out of 10, they will go with the woman's view. So the whole issue
Wow.
of allegations is
That's
a big problem.
I did not know that. Did you, Pete?
No, like a lot of this is just brand new to me.
This is crazy. My
It's
mind is.
back, guys, it's back. You tried doing it for 22 years and you wonder why I look the way I look, and I'm dressed down today.
Yeah.
I look a bit mad, but that's what happened. The 22 years of dealing with the alternate reality show of the family justice system.
Wow. Is there like and there's a a grey cloud somewhat on this discussion, but is there a silver lining anywhere in the work that you're doing, Matt? Because honestly, this is like it surely there is going to be some change here, or is that this is it's ludicrous for it to continue and perpetuate like this, or is it just getting worse?
The cases we deal with. So we've got two sides to the story. So in terms of initially, we affected climate change. We made the issue visible. In fact, the only time we got coverage is when it looked like a fucking action movie, and we've evolved from being a campaign group, doing a bit of help, to being a help organisation, doing a bit of campaigning. So, for example, for International Men's Day on the 19th of November, we've got a poll coming out. We've been doing some polling stuff on, what's public support for a Minister for Men night, because by God Almighty, we need a Minister for Men. Really, really importantly, it's been discussed recently, but that to me is like one of the key things. We have a Minister for Women Equalities. Please explain to me why we have no Minister for Men. We have 14 men taking their own lives every day. We have a male suicide epidemic. When we have, the number of homeless people, the number of men in the prison population. Most violence is man on man, and even in domestic abuse. The last British Crime Survey, I think, for 2019, even in domestic abuse, 1 in 3 victims were male. 1 in 3 men were victims of domestic abuse. And that number will be hugely underreported, because most men, and I've got family members who I know, do not report abuse.
Won't say anything. Yeah.
So we need an intelligent debate. We need to stop this shitty demonization of men, the demonization of boys. We need to stop this thing that all women are victims and all men are perpetrators. It is dangerous. It is imprinting a horrific legacy on the minds of our young boys. I mean, I've got a 17-year-old son, lives with me, Archie, who's now quite 6'4", looks like a South American dictator, and probably spends the GDP of a South American he was in just literally 2 minutes before you guys. I started speaking to you guys. But we was at school a couple of years ago, and his school said to him, well, they segregated the boys and girls out and said to the boys, if you see a woman walking up the road, you must cross the road.
What the fuck?
What the hell?
You must cross the road because you may make the woman uncomfortable. Just like, so I complained about it. and I was treated like I had like two heads. And I said, you can't go around demonizing my son and saying, he's a potential threat to a woman when he's walking down the fucking street. I
The thing
mean,
is,
Wow.
shit like that. You breed that into young women at that age. That becomes their narrative. That becomes the fucking
Yeah.
story, even if it's not
It's
true.
perpetuate. Yeah.
it is. It is. It's a really so this dictatorship of the prevailing orthodoxy, as Dr. Johnson used to call it, is really, really dangerous. And men, there has to be a line drawn in the sand where we stand up, we speak out, and we fight back, and we raise awareness about his issues. Because all the guys you're dealing with, if you're dealing with high net worth people, successful business people, they're likely. I mean, bear in mind, 40% plus of separating couples end up in the family courts. So 40% of your guys are likely to end up in the family justice system. Better wake up and get real quickly, because there's a whole pile of pain potentially coming down the tracks.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I think so many guys, and me included in this, and Ben, probably you as well, when you're in your relationship, would just not think about this until you're forced to think about it. So it's all like, oh, happily ever after, happy days, we'll make things work. When we have the odd argument and so on, and then before you know it, boom, shit, going through divorce. Now what? And it's too fucking late.
Yeah, the thing is, we all like to bury our heads in the sand. I've done it. I've been married twice, and the first marriage, I put my hands up and I fucked up, and the second one, it was the reverse way around. And but I've seen it from every side. I've seen it, obviously, all the casework we deal with, and but a lot of guys go, I just want to kick the can down the road. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to confront it. But unfortunately, the older the children get, the more difficult it becomes. Then we start having issues like parental alienation, where the resident parent or parent of care starts to poison the children. And
We've had this in our
yeah,
group. We've
yeah.
had a couple of guys talk to Ben and I personally about exactly that, and them having no idea what to do about it. They're fucking fuming, they're raging, but they don't know what to do about it.
Well, there are things you can do. I mean, on that particular subject, the women's aid, the feminist, the fanatical feminist Taliban, as I call them, the sort of frothy mouth lot with the low broomsticks and the pointy hats. Um, they've said that basically parental alienation is something somehow I constructed or we constructed. Sonia Soda, who's editor of the Guardian, wrote a very unpleasant piece about us, saying it was some form of way of fathers seeking control over mothers, which didn't seem to be very successful given his dads weren't seeing their fucking kids. But it is recognised by Kafkas, but it's not recognised by the courts. There are ways of dealing with it, but what you don't do is mention it when you first go to court, because then they'll take a view that you're trying to raise an issue which hasn't been proven by the court. However, if you get to Kafkas doing what's called Section 7 welfare report, you want to look for things like age inappropriate language that the children might be speaking. Does a language sound rehearsed? Does it sound like they've been coached? And then if Kafka say there's evidence of parental alienation, great, we can raise it. But it's a really, really difficult thing, and it needs to be nipped in the bud as early as possible. What you don't want to do is sit on your hands and the kids get to 9, 10, 11. I had a case a few years ago involving, I'd say who it is, but somebody who'd been in a relationship with Katie Price and Shanta Houghton, I think it was. And there was a daughter, and the daughter was only 4 or 5. And when she was told the father was in the building, the most sickening, disturbing screams from the child. She hadn't even seen him. She was just told he was in the building. And
Right.
it was like something like the fucking Exorcist, it was like horrific. So there are mothers out there, I'm afraid, who are poisoning their children. It's a form of abuse. In my view, it should be criminalised like any form of abuse, and it should be dealt with. But again, the courts, the government are not dealing with these issues because there seems to be men's issues, and men's issues in this day and age are right at the bottom of the political pile, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
And what we
one
Yeah.
of
do
the
need,
guys, I've got two of the guys who are going through something similar to this, and
yeah,
they are, they're just bowing down to their ex-wives. They're like, I don't know what to do, so we're just going to do whatever she wants to do because I just want to see my
well,
kids.
don't do that.
I give it I'll give her all the money she wants.
No, don't do
But
that.
it's the nice guy syndrome because I don't know what to fucking do.
Yeah, but that's like a lemming heading off a cliff. Going, that's a great idea. My wife's told me to go jump off the cliff with a load of other fucking
Yeah.
lemmings, and off we run. You know, that is the most catastrophic thing you're going to do. It's going to be for financially, it's self-destructive. For your children, it's self-destructive. You must put the children first. Your kids before cash every time before divorce. If your wife is reasonable as she says, you will go to mediation. You will agree something, and you will say, "I want shared care of the children." And I almost promise you, 99% of times, the mother will go, "Oh, you're not having shared care. These are my children, right? And they're going to live with me, and therefore your castle will become mine. Your cash will become mine. So I'll be sitting in your home with the cash and the kids, and then you'll be over there somewhere living in a fucking bedsit with no fucking money, right? Suicidal. So you've got to deal with the process correctly. You've got to deal with it by, unlike solicitors, you turn the telescope around the other way and go, right, okay, right, I need to put protection in from a child arrangements for my children and start from that point of view. If you think the mother is going to play nicely, you are seriously, seriously mistaken. In the vast majority of cases, if she agrees share care with you, bingo, right? She's reasonable. But if you start looking at things potentially going to court, you know there's a problem. There are red flags, and you've got to be so careful. This is about protecting yourself, right? This is about staying alive. This is about surviving the system and surviving relationship breakdown. And you have to put yourself first, because you're no good if you've got no money, if you're living in a bed sit, or if you're fucking dead. So
Yeah,
you've
or your
got
mental health down the pan.
God.
Absolutely.
mental health,
Yeah.
and mental health. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had it over the years. I mean, I'll be honest, completely honest. I mean, it's 22 years, and I've had terrible experiences. I've ended up in rehab twice, drink problems, serious depression. I mean, really like suicidal several times. And it's a fucking struggle. If you can't see your children, it's like
I
a
just
living
want to.
bereavement.
I just wanted to just say, Matt, though, I just want to acknowledge what you're doing. I didn't realize, the depth and the of what you've created here, and I think it's been a bit of a shock doing the podcast. To be honest, I think Pete maybe echo that. I think we're both quite shocked, and actually, I feel that there's way more to this conversation than even we've got for today. Yeah, Matt, do you know what? The first and foremost, from the listeners who are listening to this podcast, so we're going to get out to as many men as possible, because I know a lot of guys wanted us to do this for an interview. I want to personally acknowledge you for what you're doing, and how you're leading this movement. We've got a movement that we're leading of conscious men who want to be great fathers, and I think we're shoulder to shoulder with you in a different way, and I think we together are going to definitely do something in the future. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Pete, did you want to share anything before we?
Matt, how can if the guys just they're like, shit, I need to look up Matt. Like, how can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, or you can go to the website, which is www.fathers-4 as number 4-justice.org. You can find us on Twitter at F4J official. Likewise, Facebook, Insta, the usual routes. But
the links will be in the links. Yeah, the links will be in the podcast notes. So if you're listening, if you're listening to this, we'll make sure we signpost in the pod notes where you can get in touch with Matt. Because
if they contact my team, if they say they've listened to this podcast, then I can obviously we can make special arrangements for speaking to them and stuff, and trying to get them the help that they need, at least some initial advice to start with. So we've got them going in the right direction, rather than falling into the say the deadly divorce trap, or doing things we seriously would advise against.
Yeah.
Matt,
thank you, Matt. It's been a great pod.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you so much for what you shared today.
Thanks a lot. It's brilliant.